Part 32. The legitimate daughter returns, the real daughter is reborn. Author, Past and Present. Chapter 311. Chapter 311 The Morning Hall in the Dream. When he arrived in front of the mansion, Suleun happened to bump into Qin Zian and Sun Yuxuan. Sister Leun. Sun Yuxuan ran to Suleun and mysteriously took out a red sticker from his arms. Sister, what do you think this is? What is it? Suleun took a look at the post and knew what was going on, but seeing Sun Yuxuan's expression of wanting to show off, of course she had to be satisfied. Sun Yuxuan grinned even wider when he heard Suleun's answer. This is the invitation to Qingqing's birthday party. So that's it, have you thought about what gift to give Qingqing? Lin Qingqing had mentioned this earlier, and also mentioned a birthday wish to Suleun, asking Suleun to sew a beautiful skirt for her. Suleun has decided on the fabric and style in the past few days and is waiting to start. Birthday present. Sun Yuxuan's little face showed confusion, and he was thinking about what gift to prepare for Qingqing. This was the first time he had made friends of the same age. When he was in the Northwest, there were basically no children of similar age around him. Even if someone had a birthday, he didn't need to give him a gift. Strictly speaking, this is also the first time he can attend someone else's birthday. Sister, what do you think Qingqing would like? Sun Yuxuan thought for a long time, but couldn't think of an answer, so he had to ask someone. Suleun thought for a moment and replied, I don't know what Qingqing likes, but when you played with Qingqing, didn't you find out what Qingqing likes? I can't remember clearly. Sun Yuxuan racked his brains and finally replied awkwardly. When he was playing with Qingqing, he was so happy that he didn't even bother to pay attention to these things. Then when you are playing with Qingqing these days, you can try to ask and observe. Suleun reminded me. Sun Yuxuan clapped his little hands and said, I understand, Sister Leun. Looking at the sudden smile on Sun Yuxuan's face, Suleun always felt a little strange. Why did she think Xiaoxian had misunderstood her? When Mr. Zhang returned home, he saw Xinping knocked unconscious on the ground. Zhang Yang and Tino looked at each other. What happened? Lao Zhang asked in a deep voice. Tino stood up quickly, Mr. Zhang, it's all my fault. I was just walking around. Unexpectedly, this little brother suddenly appeared and saw me. Zhang Yang was worried that he would recognize me and knock him out. Grandpa, no matter whether Xinping recognizes Tino or not, we can't let Tino stay any longer. Zhang Yang spoke in a heavy tone. Tino was not slow in taking action. Maybe Xinping didn't even see Tino's face completely, but Xinping knew that there were only two people in Zhang's family. If there was one more person suddenly, Xinping would definitely be suspicious. But Zhang Yang couldn't kill Xinping, so for now he could only let Tino leave. Mr. Zhang was silent for a long time and sighed, this is the only way. Then he thought of what happened today and motioned for the two of them to follow him into the house. Brother and the others were rescued. Tino suddenly became nervous when he heard that they had been beheaded at noon, but he was relieved when he learned that someone had rescued them. People safe is good. Your injuries haven't healed yet, so it's probably not that easy to find them, but now the city's attention is on those who robbed the execution ground. Maybe you can go into the city with Xiao Yang and go to the treasure pavilion to ask about the situation. Good. Tino's eyes lit up. He was not worried about his own injuries, but more worried about Fan Yu's condition. Xiao Yang, please take Tino up to the mountain for a while, and I'll take care of Xinping's affairs first. I got it, Grandpa. Zhang Yang packed some things and took Tino up the mountain. In fact, Tino's current situation is still not suitable for such a big move, but at this time, he doesn't have to worry about much. After the two of them left for a while, Mr. Zhang stood up and pinched Xinping's man. After a while, Xinping woke up. He rubbed the back of his neck and whined, it hurts. Xinping only remembered that he came to see Zhang Yang. He saw a figure in the courtyard who looked very similar to Zhang Yang. Just as he was about to call him, he saw the man flash away. Then he felt pain in his neck and fainted. He blinked his eyes, and the pain became much weaker, and then he noticed Mr. Zhang beside him. Mr. Zhang. Xinping looked outside again, only a little bit of the sun was still exposed. It's already evening? How do you feel? Lao Zhang did not rush to ask Xinping if he had seen Tuno, but expressed concern in a calm tone. Xinping touched the back of his head again. My head still hurts a little. Mr. Zhang, do you know what happened? Do not you remember? Lao Zhang asked. Xinping thought for a while and shook his head. I just remember seeing a person, it should be brother Zhang Yang, but before I could call him, I fainted. Before I fainted, I felt a hit on the back of my head. It seemed that Xinping didn't see Tuno, and Zhang Lao breathed a sigh of relief. I just came back and saw you lying on the bed. I checked your pulse and found that you had fainted. Isn't brother Zhang Yang here? Xinping was a little confused. If brother Zhang Yang is not here, then who did he see? Lao Zhang replied, you also know that even though Xiao Yang is very strong, he doesn't know how to heal. I guess since you haven't woken up, you should go do your own thing first. When Xinping heard this, he felt it made sense. He had known Zhang Yang for several years and knew that Zhang Yang really didn't know how to heal. So that's how it is. He scratched his head and suddenly slapped his head. What a tragedy, then I haven't been back for so long, doctor, he will try to kill me. If he dares to talk to you, I will make the decision for you. Well, it's not too early. You should go back first. Then I'll leave first. Xinping waved to Mr. Zhang and turned to go to the city. Looking at Xinping's retreating figure, after a long time, Mr. Zhang cleaned up the house, closed the courtyard door, and walked up the mountain. At night. Miss, please rest first. Lian Xian pushed open the door and pinched the dim filament for Suleun, making the room light up again. Suleun yawned and put down the needle and thread in his hand. Lian Xian, please clean up for me. I'm really tired. I'm going to rest first. Yes. Suleun went to bed, closed his eyes and fell asleep almost instantly. She had another very real dream. She dreamed of her own morning hall. Suleun clearly understood that she was dreaming. She looked at her coffin and the spiritual tablet not far away, and couldn't help but feel a chill all over her body. This feeling is really strange. There were not many people walking around in the morning hall. She could only see a few servants of the Li family. Suleun smiled bitterly. She was already alone when she died. How could anyone come to see her? Until two figures appeared in front of her eyes. Suleun trembled all over and stared at the couple who walked into her morning hall. End of this chapter. The legitimate daughter returns, the real daughter is reborn. Author, past and present. Chapter 312. Chapter 312 Xiao Jin's determination. Li Rui followed Su Weiner with a respectful attitude, but he couldn't hide the love in his eyes. Wan, Queen, it is a blessing for Su that you can come and see her. She is my sister, so naturally I will come to see her off for the last time. Su Weiner acted like a queen and was dressed in extremely gorgeous clothes. It doesn't look like he's here for a funeral. Suleun looked down from a high place and wanted to laugh even more. The person who killed her came to see her off for the last time, which is extremely ridiculous. But at this time, Suleun had calmed down and looked at everything below, as if he was watching someone else's story. Su Weiner pretended to be deeply affectionate as sisters and burned incense while pretending to cry. Li Rui followed Su Weiner with an attitude of attentiveness that Suleun had never seen before. The next moment, the scene in front of me changed. Su Weiner and Li Rui have already changed their clothes. It seems that it is no longer that day. I have important matters to discuss with Mr. Li, You all should go down. The surrounding environment seems to be in a palace. After the maids and eunuchs all went down, Suwainer suddenly stepped forward and pulled Li Rui towards the bed. What happened next made Sulayun dumbfounded. This kind of thing happened several times, until in the dream, Suwainer was pregnant. In front of her eyes, after learning that she was pregnant, Suwainer's happy face gradually blurred. Sulayun woke up from his sleep. The light can already be seen faintly outside the window. She stood up, but her thoughts did not come back from her dream. Suwainer and Li Rui had an affair in the palace. Are they crazy? But Sulayun still had Suwainer's happy face in his mind. Maybe it wasn't necessarily an affair. Is Suwainer borrowing seeds? But why do this? Sulayun couldn't figure it out. She had a headache and rubbed her forehead. Even if these were things that happened in the previous life, why did she have to dream about them again and again? Miss, are you awake? Lian Xian outside heard the movement and asked softly. Sulayun hummed. He was already awake after all, and there was no need to go back to sleep. After washing and changing clothes, Sulayun went to Jiawan. As soon as he entered the room, he saw Sun Gro holding an invitation in her hand with a strange expression. Mom, is there something wrong with this invitation? Sulayun stared at the invitation for a while, but didn't see anything strange. Sun Gro handed the invitation to Sulayun. See for yourself. Open the invitation, and the few lines on it come into view. Sulayun's face changed slightly. Prince Yu's side concubine? Is there any connection between the Shen family and our Sun family? In my impression, there should be none. Sun Gro also shook his head. No, that's what's strange to me. Yer is King Jin's companion, and the relationship between King Jin and King Yu is not bad at all, but the relationship between the two princes' mother, there was indeed some discord back then. In other words, the deceased queen and concubine Min had a bad relationship. Sulayun stared at the invitation in his hand for a while. It mentioned his name and it was Sulayun who was invited. Sulayun has heard about concubine Shen. It happened in the past life. You must know that after Suwainer married Prince Yu and became Princess Yu, there were often rumors that she was not getting along with concubine Shen. It wasn't until something happened to the Shen family and concubine Shen was implicated and she was completely ignored by King Yu that no such news came out again. Yunur, you'd better not go. Sun Gro was worried. Not only did the Sun family have nothing to do with the Shen family, but Yunur had not met Shen concubine for so long since she came back. Why did Shen concubine send an invitation to Yunur herself? If there is nothing fishy about this, it would be unjustifiable. Sulayun nodded. It would be best for her not to have contact with the people on King Yu's side. She thinks she doesn't have that kind of ability. If she spends a long time with people like King Yu, she doesn't know if she will expose some problems. Instead of thinking about whether King Yu and others would notice the clues, she might as well not have any contact with him at all. Hence, Sulayun strongly agrees with Sun Gro's proposal. It's just that concubine Shen didn't give Sulayun a chance to refuse. After receiving the rejection reply from the Sun family, concubine Shen paid a visit in person. Concubine Shen didn't say much. She just expressed her sincere intention to invite Sulayun to the banquet. Although she was just a concubine, she was still a concubine of the royal family. It would not be a good thing if she refused repeatedly, so Sulayun agreed. The day of the banquet arrived in the blink of an eye. Concubine Shen's birthday party was naturally arranged at Prince Yu's mansion. Sulayun got off the carriage, looked at the exquisite mansion in front of him, and slowly exhaled. Then, led by the servant, we walked to the banquet place. After walking a few steps, Sulayun stopped. The boy in front moved faster and knelt down. I pay my respects to King Yu. I have met His Royal Highness King Yu. Sulayun bent down to salute Xiao Jin. Miss Su, please get up, I didn't expect us to meet again. Xiaojin shook the folding fan in his hand, dressed in white and elegant. Looking at his expression, it was obvious that he was waiting here just to meet Suleun. Suleun felt nervous. Could it be that King Yu noticed something was wrong with her? But it doesn't look like it. Your Highness is joking. Suleun calmed down and replied calmly. Xiaojin didn't care about Suleun's indifference. I will take Miss Su there. After saying that, the boy had already left wisely. Suleun glanced at the lotus hearts and green willows behind him, and felt a little relieved. Following Xiaojin, Suleun found that her mood became calmer and calmer. It seemed that after meeting Xiaojin a few times, she was able to control her emotions towards Xiaojin more and more. Your Majesty. Xiaojin and Suleun walked forward for a while and heard shouts. She is the maid serving concubine Shen. Your Majesty, I have asked my servant to call you over. What's the matter? Xiaojin's face didn't look good, maybe because he was disturbed. The maid's face turned slightly pale, but she still replied, I didn't say anything, I'm just a little anxious. Xiaojin was silent for a moment and said to Suleun, it seems that I cannot go there with Miss Su. Your Highness is welcome. Your Highness should go see concubine Shen first. There may be something urgent. See you at the banquet later. Hearing Xiaojin's words, Suleun's expression suddenly changed. Fortunately, Xiaojin had already turned around and followed the maid away and did not see the scene. Suleun couldn't help but tighten her palms. Facing the worried eyes of Lian Xian and Kui Lu, she shook her head. Although she didn't know how she attracted Xiaojin's attention, Suleun knew that she would never want to have anything to do with Xiaojin. Standing there for a moment, Suleun gradually regained his composure. For a moment, she even wanted to turn around and leave, but in the end she walked not far away with Lian Xian and Kui Lu. End of this chapter. You are listening to novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. The legitimate daughter returns, the real daughter is reborn. Author, past and present. Chapter 313. Chapter 313, Matchmaking. Prince Yu's mansion has a courtyard on the lake, with only a corridor leading to it. Suleun arrived at the lake, and there was a maid waiting in front of the promenade. Ping Le Xiangjun, come with me. The maid led Suleun up the corridor, while Lian Xian and Kuilai were stopped. What does it mean? Don't panic, sir. This is the courtyard in the middle of the lake and it's not suitable for too many people. Therefore, ladies and gentlemen, the maids can only stay in the small courtyard on the side for the time being. The maid patiently explained. Suleun looked at the courtyard not far away, where many women in gorgeous clothes could already be seen. I see. After saying that, Suleun walked to Lian Xian and Kuilai and ordered, you two, be more careful and don't collide with the noble man. This slave understands. Although Kuilai didn't understand why the young lady said such words, seeing Lian Xian agreeing, she naturally agreed. Suleun followed the maid up the corridor. In fact, there is only one road leading to the courtyard in the middle of the lake, and there is no need for a maid to lead the way. Suleun paid close attention all the way, and only breathed a sigh of relief when he stood completely in the courtyard in the middle of the lake. But the uneasiness in my heart still did not dissipate. Today, it seems that something bad will happen to you. Suleun frowned and became a little more vigilant. At this time, there are already many invited ladies and ladies in the courtyard in the middle of the lake. Today's banquet is to celebrate concubine Shen's birthday, but in fact, today is not concubine Shen's birthday. On the day of concubine Shen's actual birthday, there will be another banquet, and the people who come at that time will bring their families. Unlike today, most of the people who come are female relatives. At a glance, Suleun could see some familiar ladies, such as Mrs. Jian Xiao Tinjing, and Mrs. Yang who was particularly close to Qin Qiu. Mrs. Yang happened to catch Sulayun's gaze and stood up for a moment and stepped forward. Mr. Pingelxiang is here too. Mrs. Yang was a little curious. Most of the people who came today were people related to concubine Shen. Why did Mr. Pingelxiang also come? Concubine Shen doesn't seem to have anything to do with Mr. Pingelxiang. Although Sulayun was not familiar with Mrs. Yang, compared to the other ladies, Mrs. Yang was barely an acquaintance, so Sulayun took the opportunity to sit next to Mrs. Yang. After Mrs. Yang introduced the ladies at the banquet, Sulayun felt more and more weird about this matter. She was the only one who had no contact with concubine Shen before this. Just as he was thinking about it, concubine Shen had already arrived. There are two people beside her, one is Prince Yu Xiaojin, and another man who looks somewhat similar to concubine Shen. So that's how it is. Mrs. Yang suddenly muttered. Sulayun didn't hear clearly. He looked at Mrs. Yang in confusion and saw the other party leaning towards him and whispered, "Mr. Pingle Township, today is probably a blind date." Blind party? Sulayun is no stranger to this. Older boys and girls will attend such banquets under the arrangement of their elders. Dashan dynasty was an open society and there were not many restrictions on free love, so banquets like this were often held. It's just that Sulayun has never participated. Xiaojin only said a few words, just asking everyone to eat and drink well, and then left. Just before leaving, Xiaojin glanced at Sulayun. Shen Dan had been paying attention to Xiaojin's actions and naturally saw this scene. Her eyes darkened a bit. Sure enough, the prince really didn't treat Sulayun very differently. Shen Bin. Shen Dan looked away and called his brother softly. Shen Bin was still admiring the looks of the ladies around him, and when he heard Shen Dan calling him, he didn't even look back. "What do you think of the young lady next to Mrs. Yang?" Shen Dan whispered. Shen Bin looked up and his eyes lit up. "Who is that?" "Ping Le Township Lord, Sulayun." Seeing that Shen Bin was interested in Sulayun, Shen Dan felt relieved. Even though Shen Bin had the same mother as her, she couldn't control Shen Bin. Although she held this banquet as an excuse to show Shen Bin's appearance, if Shen Bin didn't like Sulayun, she would have held this banquet in vain. Fortunately, Shen Bin was very satisfied with Sulayun's face. About a month ago, Shen Dan accidentally entered Xiaojin's study and saw the portrait of Sulayun on his desk. From then on, Shen Dan fell in love with Sulayun. In the eyes of outsiders, Prince Yu Xiaojin is kind to everyone, but in fact, there are not many people who can win Xiaojin's heart. Shen Dan was very aware of Xiaojin's inner indifference, so she became wary after learning that Xiaojin was paying attention to Sulayun. When Xiaojin was called away by her before, it was because she didn't want Xiaojin and Sulayun to be alone. Su yes sister. Shen Ben didn't know what he thought of, and his face looked a little ugly. Shen Dan frowned. Why didn't she know what the problem was between Shen Ben and Su yet? How? Nothing. Shen Ben suddenly smiled and looked at Shen Dan. "Do you want me to marry her?" Realizing that Shen Ben had seen through his thoughts, Shen Dan was frightened, but he did not hide it. "Marrying a country gentleman is not a bad thing for you." "Indeed, but what do you want in exchange?" The evil smile on Shen Ben's lips did not disappear. "After all, it is my marriage, so the exchange cannot be too bad. As long as you and Sulayun can succeed, anything will work." Shen Dan returns. Shen Ben raised his eyebrows and said, "Don't worry, a young lady who comes back from the countryside is not easy to catch." Sulayun was drinking tea when he suddenly trembled. "Are you cold?" Mrs. Yang asked worriedly. "After all, the wind on the lake is still a little cool. It is not good if you catch a cold due to cold wind." Sulayun was about to shake her head, but the next moment, she had an idea. She covered her mouth and coughed lightly, and used a silver needle to herself. "It does seem a little cold." Mrs. Yang became even more worried when she saw Sulayun's slightly pale face. It's still a good time for this banquet. Why don't you tell concubine Shen and go back first? Sulayun nodded, and Mrs. Yang led her to concubine Shen. Concubine Shen, Lord Pingles Yang doesn't seem to be feeling well. Why don't you send her back first? Uncomfortable. Shen Dan saw Sulayun's face, which was indeed not very good looking. Miss Su, please go ashore first, and then I'll ask the doctor to take a look at you. After saying that, she gave Shenben a look. Shenben stood up and said, I'll take Miss Su there. Hearing this, Sulayun's doubts were cleared. Did concubine Shen want to act as a matchmaker between her and Shenben? But why? End of this chapter. The legitimate daughter returns, the real daughter is reborn. Author, past and present. Chapter 314. Chapter 314 Shen Dan's thoughts. No need to trouble Mr. Shen, my maid is on the shore. Sulayun's voice was weak, and he really looked like he was suffering from the cold. Shen Dan originally thought that Sulayun wanted to leave by being uncomfortable, but now he felt that Sulayun couldn't act like that. He happened to be going out, so Miss Su doesn't have to be so polite, but I didn't think it through, and instead made Miss Su catch a cold. It's best that Miss Su doesn't mind. As the concubine of Prince Yu, Shen Dan was able to speak to Sulayun so politely, which was a great honor to Sulayun. But with so many people watching around him, Sulayun was worried that if Shenben really asked him to give him a ride, the news would spread outside tomorrow. Sulayun tightened his palms and heard Mrs. Yang's voice from beside him. I'll take Miss Su out. I suddenly thought that I have some things to do today. I'm afraid I have to leave early. I hope concubine Shen will forgive me. Mrs. Yang stood next to Sulayun. Shen Dan hesitated for a moment and agreed to Mrs. Yang's proposal without saying anything more. The Shen family has a close relationship with the Yang family, and Prince Yu's mansion is even more closely involved with the Yang family. She had no choice but to give Mrs. Yang face. Anyway, Shenben was already interested in Sulayun. After that, he asked Shenben to ask Sulayun a few more times. I thought the two of them would get along naturally. Mrs. Yang took Sulayun up the corridor. Until they reached the shore, Sulayun breathed a sigh of relief and said to Mrs. Yang, Thank you, Mrs. Yang. I'm about to leave too, just by the way, Miss Su is too polite. Sulayun looked at Mrs. Yang. Mrs. Yang chuckled lightly. Seeing that Lian Xian and Kualayu were coming, she nodded at Sulayun and left. Looking at Mrs. Yang's leaving figure, Sulayun knew the meaning of Mrs. Yang's words, and presumably Mrs. Yang also saw something fishy. Miss, why did you come out so quickly? Lian Xian and Kualayu didn't know what was going on in the courtyard. When they saw Sulayun coming out within a quarter of an hour after entering, their faces were full of confusion. Surrounded by the servants of Prince Yu's mansion, Sulayun did not answer directly, but let Lian Xian support him. I may have caught the wind. I feel a little uncomfortable. Send me back. Liang Xin and Kualayu had noticed Sulayun's expression a long time ago. Upon hearing this, they quickly took Sulayun out of Prince Yu's mansion. After getting on the carriage, Sulayun's feeling of weakness gradually faded away. Miss, are you okay? Lian Xian was the first to notice the clues. She had studied medicine. Before, Sulayun's face was pale and he looked uncomfortable at first sight. Now his face gradually became rosy, and the feeling of weakness just now was completely gone. Although Kualayu doesn't understand medicine, she can still see the changes in Sulayun. Let's talk about it when we get back. Sulayun shook his head and leaned against the wall of the car. She felt a little pain in her head. What exactly does concubine Shen want to do? Since her rebirth, many things that have happened are not in her memory. These things are all things she has never experienced before. If she hadn't lived for a few more years, she didn't know if she would have been able to pretend just now. Sulayun sighed deeply. Lian Xian and Kualai looked at each other and saw their young lady's dilemma, so they both closed their mouths and did not dare to disturb her. Back at Sun Mansion, Sulayun asked Lian Xian to ask for the doctor. After learning that her daughter was not feeling well, Sun Gro rushed over. The doctor had just removed his hand from Sulayun's wrist. Yunur, what's wrong with you, doctor, what's wrong with my daughter? After Sun Gro asked Sulayun, he went to ask the doctor anxiously. The doctor frowned and said after careful consideration, Miss Su is fine, she just caught a cold. It's best to stay in the house these few days and not go out to avoid getting cold again. Sun Gro took a breath and said, that's good. After the doctor left, Sun Gro sat next to Sulayun. Didn't you go to concubine Shen's birthday party? How come you managed to catch the cold? In fact, it was Sun Gro who was so concerned that she even forgot one thing. That is Sulayun's medical skills. Mom, I'm fine, actually. Sulayun told Sun Gro what had happened previously, and the latter's expression gradually turned bad as he listened. Concubine Shen wants to connect Yunur and Shen Bin? It's not that Shen Bin is bad, or that she doesn't want Yunur to get married, it's just that Shen Dan's approach makes her feel that something is wrong. Even at the blind date banquet, everything was clearly stated. After all, the love between a man and a woman cannot escape the words of her parents. However, Shen Dan did this completely without telling Sun Gro and others. This made Sun Gro very uncomfortable. If concubine Shen really wants to bring me and Shen Bin together, she won't give up so easily. Yunur, what do you mean? Sun Gro could tell that her daughter didn't like Shen Dan's approach, and she didn't like Shen Bin either. Although feelings can be accumulated after getting along with her, since her daughter doesn't like it, she certainly won't force it. Maybe I'm overattended, but I just want to take advantage of the cold wind and stay at home for a few days. That's fine, you have been busy at Baiko Hall, and you happen to be at home these days to help us prepare for the wedding. Today is the 9th day of the Lunar New Year. Sulayun thought for a moment, and realized that it was only 6 days before his uncle's wedding. In the past few days, the Sun Mansion has begun to be decorated, and a lot of invitations have been sent out. That's okay, I'll stay at home and help my mother. Sulayun smiled, but still asked Kualai to go to Baiko Hall to talk about it. She would not go there these days. As expected, Shen Bin came to invite Sulayun to his house the next day. Fortunately, it was already known that Sulayun was suffering from the cold, so he easily rejected Shen Bin's invitation. But it also made Sulayun realize that Shen Dan really wanted to bring her and Shen Bin together. She couldn't figure out the reason, so she could only be cautious. She was even a little worried. If it didn't work, would Shen Dan and Shen Bin do something secretly? But these are not what she wants to think about now. Her eldest uncle's marriage is coming soon, and Sulayun is helping Sun Gro stay busy, and there are quite a lot of things at hand. The Prince of Jin's mansion, the residence of the King of Jin. Is the prince not awake yet? Lu Feng looked at Bai Rong, who retracted his hand. The latter shook his head slightly, his face as delicate as a woman's was full of solemnity. Bai Rong spoke, Master's injury is no longer serious, but I can't cure the poison he received. She clearly has the face of a woman, but the words she speaks are in a deep male voice. Is there no way at all? Lai Yufeng asked. In a few days, it will be time for the master to return from Yangzhou. If the master still doesn't wake up by then, what should they do? Is it possible that Murongu should be asked to pretend to be the master? If something goes wrong, it is not a trivial matter. Lai Yufeng frowned and heard Bai Rong say, of course there is a way, but it doesn't work. What method? Lai Yufeng asked quickly. Seeing Bai Rong smile slightly, find my master. Upon hearing this, Lai Yufeng almost couldn't help but attack Bai Rong. If he could find Bai Rong's master, would he still need to ask Bai Rong to find a way? End of this chapter. The legitimate daughter returns, the real daughter is reborn. Author, past and present. Chapter 315. Chapter 315. The Lee family and his wife are missing. By wrong side lightly, he just said it casually. If we can really find the master, nothing will happen to the master. I'm still reading the medical books left by the master. Maybe I can find a way. But I heard that the master's old friend Zhang Yaoliang seems to be in the capital. If I can find him, maybe he can find a way to save the master. Zhang Yaoliang, are you talking about the miracle doctor? The story about divine Dr. Zhang happened many years ago, and Lu Feng had vaguely heard of it. He thought for a while, then nodded and said, I will let the people from Yuelo check again. Before that, you try your best to think of something. Bai Rong's face became serious again. Lai Yufeng didn't waste any time and went to Yuelo immediately. Is anyone checking on Miss Su? Lai Yufeng was a little surprised when he learned from Elder Wuxin that someone had paid to investigate Su Leun's affairs in Jingzhou. Although some things happened during the time Miss Su came back, they were probably not major events. Why would anyone specifically investigate Miss Su's past? He is someone sent by the Shen family. Generally speaking, Yuelo wouldn't care about the identity of his customers, but when he learned that the other party wanted to check Su Leun, Elder Wuxin paid more attention. The other party didn't mean to hide it, so it was easy for him to find out. Lai Yufeng murmured in his heart, Shen family. But he had no idea for the time being, it's better to leave this matter to Miss Su herself. Since his master came back from the northwest, he seems to have no contact with Miss Su, but Lai Yufeng feels that he still needs to help with the things that need to be done. After all, Miss Su is also Su Ye's sister. Elder Wuxin also had the same idea. Lai Yufeng informed Elder Wuxin about the investigation into Zhang Yaoliang, and when he was about to leave, he paused for a while. I'll go tell Miss Su about this. It is naturally more convenient for Lai Yufeng to take a trip than for Elder Wuxin to send someone there. When Lai Yufeng rushed to the Sun Mansion, he saw the Sun Mansion decorated with lanterns and colorful decorations, and suddenly thought that General Sun Changping's wedding would be in a few days. Su Ye should have returned from Yangzhou by then. Lai Yufeng sighed, thinking of his master who was still lying on the bed, and quietly entered the Sun Mansion. Su Leun was talking about the wedding arrangements with Sun Jiaro and Qin Zian in Jiawen, but he didn't know that Lai Yufeng was coming. Miss Lian Xian came in with a bow and whispered in Su Leun's ear, Sun Wen said someone wants to see you. Su Leun was a little curious, but seeing Lian Xian's cautious look, she didn't show anything strange. Mom, second aunt, it's getting late. Let's get here first today. When the two of them looked at the sky outside the house, it was indeed a little dark. Sun Jiaro saw Su Leun getting up and said doubtfully, Yunur, I've asked someone to prepare dinner. You can just eat it here. Mom, I have something to do and I have to go back to the yard. I'll be here in a moment. Su Leun returned. Seeing this, Sun Jiaro didn't stop her. Anyway, it only took a while. She was just a little curious as to why Yunur needed to go back in such a hurry. When he arrived at the yard, Su Leun saw Lai Yufeng standing in the yard. Miss Su. Lu Feng clasped his fists and saluted. Su Leun suppressed his surprise and stepped forward, but is there anything from King Jin that you need my help with? That's not the case. Lu Feng shook his head and told the Shen family about their investigation into Su Leun. The Shen family, the natal family of Shen Dan, the concubine of Prince Yu. Su Leun asked subconsciously. Lai Yufeng was stunned for a moment. It seemed that this was the only one in the Shen family. The concubine of King Yu. Miss Su, do you know what's going on? Lai Yufeng's expression calmed down. On the surface, his master and King Yu were good brothers, but in fact, secretly, King Yu had targeted his master countless times. By investigating Miss Su, Does the Shen family want to deal with the master from Miss Su's side? Suleun hesitated for a long time. She couldn't tell Lu Feng about this kind of thing. Finally, she shook her head and said, "It's nothing. The Shen family can investigate if they want. It doesn't matter. What happened to her in Jingzhou is the same no matter who investigates it. There is nothing to hide." "I see." Lai Yufeng nodded, then took out a letter from his arms and handed it to Suleun. "General Suya asked me to give this to you." After saying that, Lai Yufeng left. Suleun opened the envelope and found two folded papers inside. One piece was written by Suya, saying that he would be able to return to Beijing soon. The one recorded above is the situation of the Li family and his wife. The Li family and his wife are missing? Suleun clenched the corner of the paper tightly, and another thing happened that was different from the previous life. In the previous life, Su Weiner brought the Li family and his wife back from the north only after she became Princess Yu. Before that, the Li family and his wife should have been living well in the north. How could they disappear? This piece of paper was carefully kept by Suleun, and the other brother's letter was brought to Sun Gro. Knowing that her son would come back in time to attend the wedding, Sun Gro felt relieved. Seeing Suleun's ugly face from time to time at the dinner table, Sun Gro asked worriedly, "Yunur, are you thinking about Shen Bin?" "Ah." Suleun was still thinking about the Li family and his wife, and did not hear Sun Gro's words clearly. He only vaguely heard the word Chen. She looked at Sun Gro doubtfully. "Mom, what did you just say?" "I mean Shen Bin, didn't he send an invitation this morning?" Seeing Suleun's appearance, Sun Gro knew that she was probably not thinking about Shen Bin. Finally hearing what Sun Gro said clearly, Suleun shook his head. "I didn't think about it." But she didn't tell Sun Gro what she was thinking. "Even if I told my mother about this matter, it would be of no use. Instead, it would only make my mother worried. The news about my brother should have come from Yuelo, which means that even the people from Yuelo have not found out the whereabouts of the Li family and his wife. It's really weird that two ordinary people can avoid Yuelo's investigation. Is it possible that King Yu did something?" Suleun thought for a moment and then rejected the idea. She knew that Su Weiner had no contact with King Yu since she married into the Li family, and it was impossible for King Yu to do such a thing for her. If it's not King Yu, could it be Su Weiner herself? Many things that happened recently turned into one confusion after another and stayed in Suleun's mind. She couldn't help but sigh and looked around, suddenly realizing that she couldn't even find anyone with whom she could discuss. "I don't know when my brother will arrive in the capital. Suburban Beijing, Fengtai Mountain. Tuno has been in the cave for 2 days. There is a lot of food beside him, as well as quilts to keep out the cold, etc., which can be said to be everything. This cave is very hidden and was discovered by Zhang Lao's Hang when he was collecting herbs. But at this time, there was a sound outside the cave. Brother, be careful. Just heal your injury and wait for me outside." It seems that they are a pair of brothers. Tuno gripped the dagger in his hand tightly. If possible, Tuno did not want to kill anyone, but if the other party saw him, he could only take action just in case. End of this chapter. You are listening to novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. The legitimate daughter returns, the real daughter is reborn. Author, past and present. Chapter 316. Chapter 316. Mr. Zhang was arrested. Tuno was hidden in the darkness, and the sounds of footsteps and breathing gradually entered. Seeing that the man was about to come in, a trace of cruelty flashed in Tano's eyes. "Shuang, why are you here?" is Zhang Yang's voice. Tano's frown relaxed a little. Is he someone Zhang Yang knows? The footsteps that came in also stopped for a moment, then turned and walked out of the cave. Outside the cave, De Zhuang saw Zhang Yang carrying a small bundle as soon as he walked out. Xiao Yang. My brother and I saw this cave and were a little curious about what was inside. Zhuang explained. These brothers are the same brothers who appeared in Baiko Hall before. Zhuang's injuries were just healed, and he followed his brother De Zhuang out again. Zhang Yang had some friendship with the two of them and said casually, I have seen this cave before, and there are some traces left by wild beasts, but I sorted it out a little. If sometimes I don't have time to come down from the mountain, I can come to this cave to stay later. That's not bad. Dazhuang and Zhuang did not have any doubts about Zhang Yang's words. Seeing that it was getting late, now that they knew what was in the cave, they were too lazy to go in again and left with the things they had hunted today. After the two of them left, Zhang Yang carried the small bundle into the cave. Those two people. Tanyo came out from behind the stone when he saw it was Zhang Yang. Zhang Yang brought a small bag with a pile of medicine and some dry food. He skillfully changed Tano's dressing and wrapped gauze. Both of the brothers are farmers. Although I have already explained it, I still have to find you a new place to live just in case. If my brother and the others have run out, maybe you can go to a ruined temple for me. Broken temple, Zhang Yang raised his eyebrows and asked, where is it? You can see it after you leave the city gate and go east. Tungno didn't know how far away from the ruined temple he was, so he briefly told Zhang Yang from the city gate. In fact, there are many dilapidated temples in the suburbs of Beijing. Some have become places where beggars gather, and some are completely abandoned. Zhang Yang also knew about many ruined temples, but he had no impression of the ruined temple that Tungno mentioned. I'll go take a look for you tomorrow. As he said that, Tungno took out a pen and paper. He wrote something on the paper and handed it to Zhang Yang. You put this note under the candlestick in the middle. If my brother and the others go to the ruined temple, they will definitely see it. New. Zhang Yang put the note away, cleaned up the surrounding area, and left. Early the next morning, Zhang Yang found the ruined temple according to Tano's description. It was empty inside, with no trace of anyone having been there. Zhang Yang stepped forward and placed a piece of paper under the candlestick. He looked around again before leaving. A moment later, a figure came in and took away the note from under the candlestick. Wang An's mansion. Have you found someone? Wang An was sitting on the chair, his eyes flashing with violence. The people on Third Brother's side were suppressing him earlier, and he could do nothing against the assassins. As a result, the assassins were actually rescued. The assassination was like a thorn to King An. If he didn't pull it out, he would feel uncomfortable. That ruined temple was where the assassins had stayed before suddenly someone came and placed a note, which made me feel strange. However, I haven't found out the contents of the note yet. Didn't find out clearly, then arrest that person first. Wang An laughed ferociously. Even if the person who put the note was not the assassin before, he must be related to the assassin. If he catches the person, are you afraid that the assassin will not be found? My subordinates have given orders to go down. Yes, but don't let the people from King Jin's side know about this. Wang An ordered. It was not that he wanted to hide it, but he just thought that if he could catch the assassin first, he might be able to please his father. What's more, before that, he also needs to calm down for a while. Yes. Zhang Yang was not in a hurry to go home. He walked around the capital and bought some things before heading home. Not far away, a large group of guards surrounded the courtyard. Zhang Yang's expression changed instantly, and he put down the things in his hands. Lao Zhang was by several guards and came out of the yard. Almost instantly, Zhang Yang hid behind the tree. Has Tano's matter been discovered? The only thing Zhang Yang could think of was this. He carefully noted down the outfits of the guards, then disappeared and ran up the mountain. Tungno is still safe in the cave. Seeing the ugly-looking Zhang Yang, Tano's breath tightened. What's wrong? Grandpa was taken away. How come? Tano's face changed drastically. I was the one who got Mr. Zhang into trouble. With that said, he stood up and was about to walk out, but Zhang Yang held him back. What you do? The person they want to arrest should be me. So, can you run over and replace Grandpa by yourself? Zhang Yang sneered. He had been on guard against this matter since Mr. Zhang decided to save Tano. Grandpa has never been a nosy person. After so many years of getting along with him, it was only with Tano that Grandpa changed his temperament. You can't go out. Zhang Yang's voice was cold. Grandpa saved you, not to let you die again. Grandpa, I will find a way, but you must leave immediately. He has not been found for so many days. He just went to the ruined temple today and someone came to his door. It is obviously not a coincidence. I'm afraid there are people guarding the ruined temple, just waiting for them to show up. A trace of annoyance flashed across Zhang Yang's eyes, but he didn't even notice it. Tuno also reacted and saw that Zhang Yang had already started to help him pack his things, but he didn't know how to react. Your injuries haven't healed yet. Don't make any big movements to avoid damaging the wounds again. Go west from here. There is a small path that goes down the mountain. After going down the mountain, keep going forward. Don't stop. Walk as far as you can. Far. Putting the prepared gifts into Tano's arms, Zhang Yang left quickly without saying anything else. He still has to keep an eye on the situation with his grandfather. In the cold and damp dungeon, Mr. Zhang straightened his posture and sat cross-legged against the wall. His expression was calm, without any panic. Soon, the sound of footsteps was heard, and then someone opened the cell door. Bring people out. Lao Zhang opened his eyes and looked around. Two jailers came forward and lifted him up, one on the left and the other on the right. Then he was brought to King'an. I heard that you are the doctor of Bai Kaitang? No wonder you are so kind. You are willing to save people whose origins are unknown. Wang An looked gloomy and stared at Mr. Zhang. Lao Zhang opened his eyelids and said in a calm tone, Your Highness, Prince An, how do you say this? You are pretending to be with me. Where is the person you saved? You also have a grandson, is he with that person? End of this chapter. The legitimate daughter returns, the real daughter is reborn. Author, Past and Present. Chapter 317. Chapter 317 Give it a try. Mr. Zhang seemed to let out a soft hum and his head dropped again. Wang An's temper is well known throughout the capital, and it is absolutely impossible to expect him to be soft-hearted towards an old man. You refuse to say it. I would like to see if it's your mouth or your body that's tough. Wang An winked at the jailer beside him, who nodded and took down a whip from the shelf nearby. The whip was soaked in spicy water by the jailer. When it was taken out, it was still stained with some chili flakes. Lao Zhang did not look at the jailer's movements, but slowly closed his eyes. He knows how long his old bones can last. I just hope nothing happens to Xiao Yang and Tano. The jailer waved his whip in the air, and the sound of the air breaking did not move Mr. Zhang at all. Wang An frowned and said, Do it. With a command, the whip in the jailer's hand swung violently and fell on Mr. Zhang's back. A wound instantly appeared on Mr. Zhang's back. Mr. Zhang let out a muffled groan, and his face immediately turned pale. Every time the jailer swung the whip, it was full of strength and fell on Mr. Zhang's back without any restraint. After a few whips, Mr. Zhang's body could no longer hold on and he staggered and fell to one side. Blood spilled from the corners of his mouth. Seeing Mr. Zhang fall to the ground, the jailer stopped what he was doing and looked at King'an. After all, what if Mr. Zhang is killed and the assassin cannot be found? Wang An waved his hand impatiently and asked the jailer to retreat first. He stared at Mr. Zhang for a while. Even if you don't say anything, if your grandson is a little filial, he won't leave you alone, right? Lao Zhang's body moved slightly. Wang An's lips curved into a cold arc. Pull the person down first, don't let him die. After saying that, King An waved his sleeves and turned to leave. Of course Zhang Yang could not leave Mr. Zhang alone. He disguised himself and went to Baiko Hall. The door of Baiko Hall was supposed to be open, but the door was closed tightly. I'm afraid it has also been investigated. He hesitated for a moment, turned around and ran towards Dr. He's house. Dr. He looked sad, and his wife beside him brought him a glass of water. Shopkeeper Wang has already thought of something, so don't think too much. Lao Zhang. As he was talking, a stone was thrown in from outside and hit the ground in front of the two of them. Dr. He stood up suddenly and walked out. As soon as he walked out of the house, a hand stretched out from beside him and covered his mouth. Dr. He. As soon as Dr. He heard the voice, he recognized the person. Zhang Yang led Dr. He into the room and quickly closed the door. Zhang Yang, what's going on with Mr. Zhang? In the morning, Baiko Hall opened as usual, but an hour later, a group of soldiers came and took them out one by one for questioning, saying that Mr. Zhang had rescued an assassin. They didn't know anything. They were asked a few questions and then passed away. When Dr. Wang learned that Mr. Zhang had been arrested, he immediately closed the door and said he was going to find someone to help. Although Dr. He has stayed in the capital for many years, he is just a doctor and can't help much, so he can only go home first. Grandpa, he did save an assassin. It's not the one on the notice board before, is it? Dr. He asked almost immediately. Mrs. He also looked nervous at the side. Mr. Zhang was kind to Dr. He and Mrs. He. No matter what, they did not want to see anything happen to Mr. Zhang. But there is really nothing they can do to save the assassin. That was the assassin who wanted to kill King An, and ordinary people like them could easily provoke him. Zhang Yang didn't expect to ask them for help. He only confirmed some things from Dr. He. It was King An's men who captured Mr. Zhang, not the imperial army. In other words, this matter may not have reached the palace yet. There are few places where Mr. Zhang could be imprisoned. Zhang Yang was thoughtful. Dr. He noticed his expression, hesitated for a moment, and said, Xiao Yang, those guards are still looking for you, you better not act rashly. Dr. He knows that Zhang Yang is very skilled, but no matter how powerful one person is, he can't beat so many guards, right? I understand, Dr. He, you don't have to worry about me. Zhang Yang smiled and left quickly under the watchful eyes of Dr. He and Mrs. He. Dr. He and Mrs. He looked at each other, knowing that Zhang Yang's words were probably meant to comfort them. Lao He, can you think of a solution? Mrs. He asked. Dr. He looked sad, what can I do? I'd better wait for news from the shopkeeper. Physician Wang has superb medical skills and has treated many high-ranking officials in the capital. However, this time he came to ask for help, but no one was willing to help. Let's not talk about King An, but when it comes to rescuing the assassin, they don't dare to take action casually. Shenji Wang looked for several houses, but was rejected without even entering. He was walking on the street, his expression full of helplessness. Wang Shenai. The woman's voice sounded, and Dr. Wang raised his eyes, thought for a moment, and recognized the other person. Are you the maid next to Grandma Wen? Yes, it's me. Qiu Tong smiled. Since leaving Wen Mansion and returning to Qin family, her condition has been getting better and better. The lady has talked about you before. Do you seem to be in any trouble? No, it's nothing. How is your lady doing? Physician Wang said a few words to Qiu Tong, and he had someone in mind. Perhaps she would like to help. Sun Mansion. Physician Wang panted heavily, stepped forward, and said to the concierge, is Miss Soleun here? The porter looked at divine Dr. Wang and asked, what do you want from the young lady? I am the shopkeeper of Baikatang. I will ask Miss Su for help first. You are the shopkeeper of Baikatang. Come in first and I'll have someone pass the news. The concierge knew that Sulayun was going to Baiko Hall for consultation these days, so he heard that divine Dr. Wang was the shopkeeper of Baiko Hall, so of course he would warmly entertain him. After learning that Dr. Wang had arrived, Sulayun quickly went to the front hall. I saw divine Dr. Wang sitting in his seat, looking towards the door from time to time. Monsieur. As soon as he saw Sulayun, Dr. Wang immediately stood up and stepped forward. Noting the movements and expressions of divine Dr. Wang, Sulayun's face darkened a bit. Shopkeeper Wang, what happened? Physician Wang gritted his teeth, but for a moment he didn't know how to speak. After a moment, he still spoke out, Mr. Zhang was arrested by King An's people. What? Sulayun was stunned for a moment, then quickly came to his senses and asked about the situation. After understanding the reason, Sulayun's face became gloomy, and he felt a lot more confused. Does Mr. Zhang have anything to do with Tuno? Tuno. Physician Wang doesn't know who Tuno is. That's the assassin on the wanted poster. I don't know that either. Physician Wang shook his head. Sulayun thought for a moment, I'm not sure if I can help, but I can give it a try. Thank you, Miss Su. End of this chapter. The legitimate daughter returns, the real daughter is reborn. Author, past and present. Chapter 318. Chapter 318. There is only one doctor named Zhang. Although it is not good news, Dr. Wang also feels a little comfort. Shenji Wang did not stay long, and immediately got up and left, continuing to look for people, hoping to rescue Mr. Zhang. Sulayun asked someone to prepare a carriage and headed to the Jin Palace. The matter of the assassin was handled by King Jin and the Forbidden Army. Sulayun did not know anyone there, so he could only think of King Jin. As for whether King Jin can take action, Sulayun didn't have high expectations. The king of Jin was seriously injured and lay on the bed, so Lu Feng stepped in to handle the matter regarding the assassin. Lu Feng was surprised to learn that King An had captured a person who was suspected of harboring an assassin, but he did not go to King An. After all, the one who could really talk to King An should be his master. If he went, King An would not know much about it. Give him face. Ms. Su, I'm afraid I can't help with this matter. Lu Feng is a little embarrassed. He didn't know what his master would choose if he was awake, but under the current circumstances, he would do less to prevent the news of his master's accident from being discovered. Sulayun understood what Liu Feng meant and sighed softly, in this case, it's me who's disturbing you. After saying that, she turned to leave and saw someone coming in from the door. He has the face of a woman, but his body shape can still tell that he is a man. Bai Rong walked briskly. When he saw Sulayun, he paused, nodded slightly, and walked to Lu Feng. There's news about Dr. Zhang. Where? Liu Feng asked with joy on his face. Hearing the word Zhang, Sulayun subconsciously stopped, but soon realized that what these two people were talking about had nothing to do with Mr. Zhang. She walked out, and her feet that had just stepped out of the threshold suddenly stopped. The male-looking man behind him answered Liu Feng's question. I found out that the other person is in a medical clinic, which seems to be called Baiko Hall. Baikatang, Dr. Zhang? Sulayun didn't know if there were so many coincidences in the world, but as far as she knew, there was only one doctor named Zhang in Baikatang, Mr. Zhang. Liu Feng seemed to remember something and looked at Sulayun. The latter has stood up straight, and their eyes slowly met. Ms. Su, Baikatang. Before Liu Feng could ask the question, Sulayun said, there is only one doctor named Zhang in Baikatang, and now he has been captured by King An's people. What are you guys saying? Bai Rong's eyes wandered between the two of them, and he couldn't help but ask. He also had thoughts in his mind. Could it be that King An knew about miracle Dr. Zhang and deliberately arrested him? Bai Rong was obsessed with medical books just to find a way to cure King Jin, so he was not very clear about some things in the outside world. Miss Su, I will find a way to rescue Mr. Zhang. But before that, they must first determine whether the other party is really the Dr. Zhang they are looking for. Even Suleun found it a bit thrilling due to the twists and turns. Suleun didn't stay long. When he left Jin Prince's mansion, he asked Kuliu to find shopkeeper Wang and inform him of the matter. Lai Yufeng also acted very quickly, taking action as soon as there was news. Coincidentally, when Kuliu found shopkeeper Wang, the people from Lai Yufeng also happened to find shopkeeper Wang. Shopkeeper Wang was brought to Lai Yufeng. Shopkeeper Wang looked at Lai Yufeng seriously. Who are you? Shopkeeper Wang, we don't mean any harm, we just want to know the identity of Mr. Zhang in Baikatang. Mr. Zhang? He is just a doctor from our Baikatang. Shopkeeper Wang's eyes flickered. Lai Yufeng easily saw that shopkeeper Wang was hiding something, that Mr. Zhang is now captured by King An's people. If you are willing to cooperate, we can rescue Mr. Zhang. Rescue Mr. Zhang. This proposal made shopkeeper Wang very tempted, and he ran around all afternoon just to rescue Mr. Zhang. But the prerequisite is that he must tell the person in front of him the identity of Mr. Zhang. Shopkeeper Wang certainly knew the identity of Mr. Zhang. Mr. Zhang had not allowed him to tell anyone about this matter despite his numerous instructions. He Ying came in from outside and said in a low tone, I went to check and King An's people have already tortured Mr. Zhang. Shopkeeper Wang trembled slightly. Torture? Can Mr. Zhang's body and bones bear it? Why do you want to know Mr. Zhang's identity? He slowly raised his head and looked at Lai Yufeng and Black Eagle. Lu Feng and He Ying both disguised themselves and did not directly reveal their true appearance. Especially Lai Yufeng, who has been with Xiao Shenjiao all year round and often shows up. There is no guarantee that shopkeeper Wang has seen him. You don't need to know many things, but don't worry, as long as Mr. Zhang's identity is confirmed, we will not only rescue him, but also protect him. You don't have to worry. Shopkeeper Wang thought about it and probably understood something. I want to confirm the identity of Mr. Zhang, just to seek treatment from Mr. Zhang. What do you want to know? Shopkeeper Wang has an idea and his mood has stabilized. Lai Yufeng and He Ying looked at each other, and the former said, is Mr. Zhang Zhang Yaliang, the miracle doctor? Under the gazes of the two men, shopkeeper Wang slowly nodded his head. Compared to Mr. Zhang, he is very underrated as a miracle doctor. That is to say, some people in the capital think highly of him and call him a miracle doctor. But Mr. Zhang is different. Lao Zhang's reputation as a miracle doctor is of great importance. Just a nod was not enough. Shopkeeper Wang also provided evidence to completely prove Mr. Zhang's identity. Confirming that Mr. Zhang is Zhang Yaliang, Lu Feng and Black Eagle acted non-stop to rescue Mr. Zhang. Their methods are also very simple and crude. He rushed directly into the place where Mr. Zhang was being held and rescued him. King An was so angry that he sent his men to investigate, but no trace could be found. In the end, King An suppressed the matter. Even if Mr. Zhang was gone, there was still Zhang Yang. King An was waiting for him to fall into the trap. The palace of the Prince of Jin. When Mr. Zhang was rescued, his condition was not good, but fortunately, there were only flesh wounds, but because of his old age, his body could not bear it. Bai Rong diagnosed Mr. Zhang, applied medicine to the wound, and took care of it before he came out of the house. When will Zhang Yaliang wake up? As soon as Lai Yufeng saw Bai Rong coming out, he stepped forward and asked. Black Hawk had left to take care of the rest. Bai Rong said in a deep voice, it shouldn't take long for him to wake up, but if a person can wake up, the wound cannot heal so quickly. I'm not sure if he will have the strength to save the master after he wakes up. It cannot be cured, but it must be cured. Lai Yufeng looked serious. He saved Mr. Zhang. His purpose was simply to let him save his master. If he couldn't even do this, he wouldn't mind sending the man back to Kingen. Bai Rong patted Lu Feng on the shoulder. You have people look at the condition of divine Dr. Zhang, and I will go and read the medical books left by the master. Lai Yufeng nodded. He did not let anyone else guard him, but guarded the door himself. If there was any movement, he would have someone call Bai Rong. Now, all that is needed is to wait. End of this chapter. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. The legitimate daughter returns, the real daughter is reborn. Author, past and present. Chapter 319. Chapter 319 Threat. About an hour later, the sky gradually became brighter. A weak groan came from inside the house. Lai Yufeng's face hardened and he pushed the door open and entered. Inside the house, Mr. Zhang woke up as expected. He seemed to have not yet come to his senses, his eyes were a little confused. When the confusion in his eyes gradually faded away, he also noticed Lai Yufeng. Who are you? Zhang Yaoliang. Hearing Lai Yufeng call out this name, Mr. Zhang's body trembled slightly. He didn't know whether it was pain or other reasons. I haven't heard this name for a long time. Lao Zhang did not refute Lu Feng and slowly sat up from the bed. Lai Yufeng stared at Mr. Zhang for a while. As soon as he looked away, Bai Rong arrived. Shanai Zhang. Seeing Mr. Zhang wake up, Bai Rong's face showed a bit of joy. Lao Zhang looked at Lai Yufeng, then at Bai Rong, and suddenly said, I haven't saved anyone for a long time. Bai Rong was stunned. Didn't he say that Mr. Zhang was still a doctor at Baikatang? Why has it been so long since I saved anyone? Lao Zhang saw Bai Rong's doubts, but didn't explain much. Although he is in Baikatang, it has indeed been a long time since he personally rescued someone. No was an accident. Lu Feng twitched his lips and said, just because I haven't saved people for a long time doesn't mean I won't save them forever. Bai Rong gave Lu Feng a look. This was a miracle doctor. Although he had disappeared in recent years, Zhang Yaoliang was still in the limelight back then. What's more, Mr. Zhang was probably the only one who could save his master. He didn't want to be killed because of Lu Feng's cold face. This hope was lost. Mr. Zhang, unless we are desperate, we don't want to force you. Bai Rong softened his tone and persuaded patiently. But Mr. Zhang was unmoved. You have a grandson, and you don't want anything to happen to him, right? Lai Yufeng was a little impatient. He rescued Mr. Zhang, but he didn't want Mr. Zhang to refuse. When Zhang Lai heard this, a smile appeared at the corner of his mouth. I'm very relieved about Xiao Yang. The air around me seemed to be stagnant. Lai Yufeng's face became increasingly ugly. Bai Rong gave Lai Yufeng a look and asked him to go out first. When Lu Feng left, Bai Rong looked at Mr. Zhang and said in a gentle tone, Mr. Zhang, although I don't know what your concerns are, you are indeed our last hope. Although she looks like a boy and a girl, Bai Rong has a gentle temperament and makes people feel like a spring breeze when she smiles. Therefore, Mr. Zhang had a good first impression of Bai Rong. But even so, Mr. Zhang's words were still ruthless. If you feel that you have suffered a loss, you can send me back. As for where to go back, both parties know it well. After Mr. Zhang finished speaking, he couldn't help coughing, which affected the wounds on his body. His face turned pale again. Bai Rong frowned slightly, but didn't say anything to persuade her. She just stood up and left the room. Outside the house, Lu Feng stood in front of him with a dark face. When he heard the movement of Bai Rong coming out, he turned around and looked. Seeing Bai Rong's expression, Lai Yufeng snorted coldly, it seems you didn't succeed either. After saying that, Lai Yufeng was about to walk into the house, looking at his posture as if he was going to force himself. Bai Rong stopped him. What you do? Calm down, what can you do now? Bai Rong pulled Lai Yufeng away from him before drinking. Actually, Lu Feng knew in his heart that even if it was forced, it would have no effect on Mr. Zhang. Otherwise, even with his skill, Bai Rong would not have allowed Bai Rong to pull him away. I just wanted to try when I couldn't do anything. Lai Yufeng's voice was a bit annoyed. Had he been more careful, nothing would have happened to his master. Bai Rong shook his head helplessly. Why wasn't he worried? The master had been in a coma for many days, and the poison on his body had spread. If it dragged on any longer, it would penetrate deep into the internal organs. By that time, even if the master woke up, there would be no it's been a good few years. I will try to talk to Divine Dr. Zhang again. Bai Rong paused. You have someone look for Zhang Yang. Maybe we can start with him, or start with other people from Baiko Hall. Other people. Lai Yufeng thought of Suleun. Since the other party will come to ask for help on Mr. Zhang's behalf, maybe we can let Miss Su try to persuade Mr. Zhang. He did it as soon as he thought of it. Lai Yufeng ran to Sun's house again in a hurry. It was only when he climbed over the courtyard wall that he realized it was only Yinchi, and Miss Su might not have woken up yet. Sun Wen looked at Lai Yufeng, who was stunned for a moment under the courtyard wall, sighed and stepped forward. Lai Yufeng, guard, what can I do? Since the incident with King Jin, the Lai Yufeng guard has been coming more frequently. Sorry, I was so anxious that I forgot the time. Lai Yufeng didn't want to disturb Suleun when he came. After all, he wanted to ask for Miss Su. Secondly, as Suleun's subordinate, Sun Wen naturally could not disturb his master, so the two of them stood together and waited for time to pass. About an hour later, the yard became busy. After confirming that Suleun was up, Sun Wen-K stepped forward to report. Learning that Lai Yufeng was going, Suleun packed up and let him in. But Mr. Zhang was rescued. Already rescued. Although he didn't know why Lai Yufeng came to inform him personally, Suleun was relieved to learn that Zhang Lao was safe. Lai Yufeng continued, Miss Su, I'm afraid I need your help. Suleun looked puzzled and pointed at himself. Since Mrs. Zhang has been rescued, is there anything else she needs to do? When Suleun learned about Lu Feng's purpose, he was surprised and felt that there was a trace to follow. These days in Baikatang, she did not see Mr. Zhang personally saving patients. At most, he just stood aside and gave advice. Furthermore, since Mr. Zhang is a miracle doctor, why should he remain anonymous? Piece by piece, it seems that the answer is almost there. I can try. Suleun agreed to Lai Yufeng's request. Rescuing King Jin was also an important matter for her. Half an hour later, Suleun changed his appearance as a man and followed Lu Feng to Prince Jin's mansion. She was in a hurry yesterday and could handle it when she went to Prince Jin's mansion. But if she went to Prince Jin's mansion for 2 days in a row, it would be unreasonable. What's more, in the eyes of outsiders, the king of Jin is not in the palace, and it will only be more strange for a girl who has not yet left the palace to go there every day. Inside the house, Bai Rong was still trying to persuade Mr. Zhang, but Mr. Zhang really couldn't get enough of it. If Bai Rong hadn't been patient, he probably wouldn't have been able to continue talking. Don't try to persuade me. If you have the skills, why don't you go and see if there are other ways to save people? Lao Zhang closed his eyes and ignored Bai Rong. The ones he is more worried about now are his grandsons Zhang Yang and Tino. The door was pushed open, and a few more footsteps were heard. The next time someone tries to persuade me, it will be the same. Mr. Zhang, it's me. Hearing the familiar voice, Mr. Zhang opened his eyes and looked. Leun, why are you here? He looked at Lai Yufeng beside him, his expression suddenly darkened. Did you capture Leun and want to threaten me? End of this chapter. The legitimate daughter returns, the real daughter is reborn. Author, past and present. Chapter 320. Chapter 320 The Poison of Southern Xinjiang. Mr. Zhang, it's not what you think. Sulayun was helpless when he noticed that Mr. Zhang was worried about him. What emerged in his heart was more gratitude. Although Mr. Zhang was kind to her because of her master, in the end she benefited a lot. Mr. Zhang's eyes turned around Sulayun, and looking at Lu Feng's posture, it really didn't look like a threat. He thought of another possibility. You know each other. Vaguely, Mr. Zhang could sense that Lai Yufeng's attitude towards Sulayun seemed somewhat respectful. Sulayun stepped forward, noticed the pale color of Mr. Zhang's lips, and looked at Mr. Zhang again. There was a bit more anger in her eyes. Did they torture you? Out of the way. Mr. Zhang smiled, and his voice was comforting. Sulayun suppressed the anger in his heart and answered Mr. Zhang's question. They asked me to come here in the hope of persuading you to help treat a person. What if I say, I don't want to save him? Facing Sulayun, Mr. Zhang was shaken. This was his old friend's apprentice, so he should naturally help him if he could. Although Sulayun didn't understand why Mr. Zhang was unwilling to take action, he also saw that what Mr. Zhang said was not a joke. She frowned and said nothing. After a moment, Mr. Zhang sighed, as if he had compromised, and said, I can take a look at the situation first. Maybe that person's situation doesn't require me to take action. Sulayun was stunned, unable to understand why Mr. Zhang suddenly agreed. Very good. Bai Rong looked happy and immediately asked Lu Feng to make arrangements. The person who had the accident was Xiao Shenjiao. Naturally, it was not easy to let Mr. Zhang know about it directly. So he asked Mr. Zhang to diagnose Xiao Shenjiao's pulse, so Lai Yufeng made some preparations to avoid Mr. Zhang learning Xiao Shenjiao's identity. There were no lights in the room, and there was a curtain hanging in front of the bed. He only put one hand on the table. Lao Zhang noticed the surrounding environment, thought in his mind, and put his hand on it. His expression gradually became serious. Several people present seemed to feel Mr. Zhang's emotions. Sulayun has a keen sense of smell. Although she doesn't know what Xiao Shenjiao's condition is, she can smell the unique fragrance of several medicinal materials in the surrounding air. Everything is used to hang one's life. In other words, Xiao Shenjiao's current situation is probably just a sigh of relief. No wonder Lai Yufeng was so anxious. After an unknown amount of time, Mr. Zhang removed his hand and said, I need to take a more detailed look at the condition of the injured. Physicians make inquiries, look, smell, and ask questions, and often all of them are indispensable. Bai Rong understood the meaning of Zhang Lao's words, but he was a little hesitant. He said to Mr. Zhang, we need to discuss this matter. Please do it. Lao Zhang nodded lightly, turned around and walked out of the house. Sulayun also followed him. She couldn't get involved if Mr. Zhang knew about Xiao Shenjiao. Mr. Zhang, what do you think of his condition? Very bad. Facing Sulayun, Mr. Zhang's expression became a little better, even I am not completely sure that I can cure him. Sulayun's breathing slowed down a bit, but he still calmed down. Lao Zhang glanced at Sulayun for a few times, thought of something, and continued, if your master is here and cooperates with me, the chance will be greater. Sulayun smiled helplessly. Mr. Zhang would test himself every chance he got. Earlier, she said that she and the master met in Jingzhou. At that time, Mr. Zhang did not have any suspicion. However, during the time she was at Baikatang, Mr. Zhang became suspicious. But it's true that her medical skills were all taught by her master. Mr. Zhang couldn't tell it before because he didn't have much contact with her. After being in contact with her for a long time, he will naturally find out. If it was really just a matter of a few days as master and disciple, they shouldn't be so identical. It's a pity that the master is not in Longjio Temple now. Even if he were, she would not expose the master's whereabouts. Is it possible that this is Xiao Shenjiao's fate? Mr. Zhang, no matter what you see for a while, please keep it a secret. Bai Rong came out of the house and greeted Mr. Zhang respectfully. It is a matter of life and death for the master, and nothing can be done carelessly. Zhang Liyi raised his eyebrows and followed Bai Rong into the house. At this time, the curtain blocking the bed had been removed, and Mr. Zhang saw Xiao Shenjiao lying on the bed at a glance. His eyes flickered again and again, obviously recognizing Xiao Shenjiao. How did he get the poison? You all need to tell me the details. Mr. Zhang was checking Xiao Shenjiao's situation and asking Bai Rong and Lai Yufeng. The movements of his hands also became agile. Sulayun also entered the room and noticed Xiao Shenjiao on the couch. There was no trace of blood on that face. If it weren't for the weak breathing, it would have looked like a dead person. As Mr. Zhang finished his inspection, Bai Rong and Lu Feng also explained the matter clearly. This poison is related to the Northwest Turks. Ashina Yang was captured by Xiao Shenjiao. Although Yu Hualin Khan redeemed him, it was a great shame and humiliation for Ashina Yang. Yu Hualin Khan probably also supported Ashina Yang, so he planned for many days, and Xiao Shenjiao's whereabouts were leaked, so he took the opportunity to take action. The soldiers they sent were all dead men and they would fight to the death. At that time, there were only two people, Xiao Shenjiao and Su Ye. After all, it was difficult to stop many people and they were accidentally attacked. When Lai Yufeng arrived, Xiao Shenjiao was covered in blood and fell into a coma. Sulayun's heart tightened when she thought of the blood and wounds on her brother's body when he came back. She was even a little lucky that her brother was not poisoned. This poison should not be owned by Turks. Lao Zhang concluded, it's more like the poison from southern Xinjiang. Southern Xinjiang? Sulayun didn't know much, but she thought of one person, the weird Granny Lan next to Su Weiner. It seems that the other party has some involvement with southern Xinjiang. I still need to test the specific poison. Li Yun, please stay and help me. Lao Zhang said. Sulayun did not refuse. On the contrary, Bai Rong's face changed slightly, but he did not object. Lai Yufeng asked someone to arrange a room next to Xiao Shenjiao's house for Mr. Zhang and Sulayun to use. Also following Mr. Zhang was Bai Rong. Sulayun didn't know Bai Rong, but seeing his posture, he understood that he was a doctor. You smell and see. Lao Zhang took Xiao Shenjiao's poisonous blood and the flesh from the wound, and after doing some treatment, asked Sulayun to observe. He knew that Sulayun's sense of smell was stronger than ordinary people, and he might be able to smell something about these things. Sulayun took the bowl from Mr. Zhang and observed it carefully. Then he pursed his lips and said, blood doesn't taste the same as meat. When Bai Rong heard this, his eyes widened a bit, and he also stepped forward to smell it. But in his nose, the smell of both was the same disgusting, and he couldn't tell any difference at all. He stared at Sulayun for a long time, then hesitantly said, Miss Su, what's the difference between the two flavors? End of this chapter.